It's Sue reading in, and you're with me on Get Sold, and we're going to call this part two. And what I'm going to do is just kind of go back um, to when I was 9 and talk about the things that altered my self perception for the rest of my life until 52. So, when I was 9, I had a very open mother. She liked the subject of sex. She liked to talk about it. She was free about it, open about it. And I guess in one way that was good because then there was no that shame thing that we all tend to put around sex and our bodies and all that. But I don't think she fully understood the ramifications of being 9 years old. And she brought, at first, it was just, you know, simple stuff like Playboys, whatever, into the house. They were not meant for me, but the other person and I would pour through them. Now, at this point, I was a growing girl. I didn't know my outer self that well. I didn't know what to think of myself. We're learning at that point. In my era, we didn't have the stuff that the 9-year-old girls have today. The influence of makeup and that all that whole thing, um, or phones and TikTok videos and all that. We didn't have that, so in a sense, it was kind of more innocent back then. But when she brought the material into the house, I noticed things changing with me. I didn't notice right away, but I began to physically react in time to these things. So, in other words, what I'm saying is, soon after being 9, my body was beginning to get stimulated um, early. So, uh, because it was like a 1-2 punch. I had the physical um, sexual abuse going on, and that was from being an infant on up. So I didn't know what it was like not to be touched that way. I didn't know that feeling. I didn't know that sovereign feeling that this body belonged to me. I didn't know that. It wasn't mine. It was something I was existing in, but it wasn't mine. It was to be used however it was needed. So that was the first breach. But when she brought the magazines in, it skewed my entire image of myself and what I would grow up to want to be, aspire to be. I had, uh, in my early adult life, all my activities um, were centered around sex. Anything to have to do with sexuality, anything that was just normal for me. That was just comfortable. But I had two sides of it. When my mother didn't bring the porn in, it was like we had no problems being nude or naked. It was like a very natural feeling. Kids are naturally innocent. So when they're running around naked, as long as they don't have people like, hunting them down for other purposes, we should have that feeling. We should have that very natural. I remember at 18, I went to a nude beach and it was so liberating. People generally we're too embarrassed to look at each other in the beginning, and then after that it becomes just a natural thing. You just kind of look at each other's eyes. You don't, you might scan up and down somebody, but it was a very liberating feeling. But from 9 on, or maybe I should say birth on, then 9 being that other pivotal point, I was always juggling the light and the dark of sexuality, of nudity, of all of it. Now, factor in that I had this vein of creativity, like this whole like just energy, creative energy that was my most of the times my saving grace. In other words, if I was feeling depressed or even older when I was, suicidal, like when I was young, I did try the slicing of my wrists, and then 2 years later, I was threatened with being sent to an institution. Instead, I got to go to Belgium to spend a month with my aunties. So I suppose that was better, way better. But they didn't understand what was happening to me. They didn't understand where this was all coming from. And our family dynamic was a mess. I mean, if you wanted to be heard, you screamed. And of course, that didn't get you anywhere. But getting back to specifically the porn at 9 years old, I absolutely had no natural evolution into my body. I saw only the most extreme females. I saw men too. And so I had like I had that same passion for men, either sex, it didn't matter, um, because I was exposed to it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm saying is when it comes to self image, self esteem, your identity, knowing when and when not, it got me in a lot of trouble. There was somebody when I went through this whole cataclysmic Dark Night of the Soul thing at 52, I found somebody who was very good at explaining not just the human psychological part of this kind of abuse, but also an energetic perspective as well. And I'm not sure if I should say his name here or not, but maybe I can put it in the written part of the video. But I found that because it meshed with my spiritual side, which I always had, I always say I always had one eye open, spiritually. So I knew all of this was for a reason. I just, when you're a kid, you're a kid. You just do. Um, so it got worse and worse with the porn. Like we started looking, it would come into the house. I'm not gonna say who it belonged to because I'm trying not, I'm not trying to out anybody. I'm just trying to deal with my own stuff. And it would just get worse and worse. We got like the Swedish porn. We got like really, really raunchy stuff. I mean, then the hustlers and everything. And then comes the experimentation on others. And it seems innocent at first, which it is, to some extent. I mean, all kids are gonna innocently explore. But now it's almost like it's gotten so twisted out there that even that can't be done. I mean, cannot be a natural right. Even being nude, children, you got to watch out for pedophiles and stuff. You just, it's like we're not safe to be innocent anymore. But the damaging parts that happened to me from 9 on was the rewiring that went on in my head, that I was worth less, that I was only a body, and it was only good if I was good to someone else. If somebody could use this for what they needed, then that's the whole reason I exist, is to give this away to make someone else happy. I had no ownership of this whatsoever. None. And it's a soul theme that I chose, being the body and all that, but it doesn't make it any easier when you're going through it. In fact, you don't even know you're going through it in a sense until you crash and burn a million times. But the really hardest part is when I tried to have relationships with men, with people. And the insecurity, once I fell in love, that was when the trigger would activate. Once I fell in love with somebody, the trigger would activate to where they could not see anyone on TV. Now, mind you, I have a whole other rant about why there's nudity in movies as much as there is, and why it's always a certain type of woman, and why it's always, meant to appeal to the male population. But that's a whole nother rant. But this person that I would fall in love with, I found out one time when we had our first official place, something came on TV and it was a strip club scene in a movie. And I didn't know that I was that I had these triggers. I didn't have an episode yet to actually embroil me in one. Well, it happened. A good friend of mine was over, my best friend. My kids were little, they were in bed or whatever, and we were just gonna sit down and watch TV. This was in the old days where, like, I don't think we had HBO. That was new back then, but something was on TV. Maybe it was. I don't know. We didn't subscribe to it though. And there was a nude part in a movie in a strip club. Of course, that's so classic, right? And I could feel the physical reaction I had, and I was only 22 at the time. 22. Now, I was modeling at the time. I was my best body weight ever. Yeah, I had scars on my stomach from the babies having children, but it was like I was in the best shape of my life. People would fall over, you know, giving me their phone numbers and stuff, and I was like oblivious to it all. I didn't partake in it. I was just like, no, I'm with my person and that's it. But this day, as soon as I saw the boobs across the TV, this immediate reaction, I my heart started pounding. I was flush with heat. I never felt so much rage before. Everything in me just left. All sense of reason, everything. And I started pulling pictures off the wall, smashing them, screaming. And my poor friend, she didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't know what was happening to me. But it was this massive trigger that was tied into being so insecure about my body and myself. And it only happened if I had feelings for somebody. Like if it was just a room full of people, I'd be uncomfortable for sure. But it wasn't that blow up thing. It was like, you can't see another woman. You cannot, because that's my job. And if I'm not pleasing you, then I don't deserve to live. Literally, that's what the trigger told me. I did not deserve to live if I couldn't be that person on the screen or whatever it was that was being the object of my person's desire. Now, that's irrational because he's not thinking that at all. In fact, he goes, I didn't even see it. And he was not raised in porn, so he had a completely different uh he wasn't stimulated early. So he didn't need that. To me, he's a man's man. He didn't need that. When it's time, it's time. When it's not, whatever. You don't let that run your life. And I guess that's why I needed somebody like that because in my head, it was insane. And from that point forward, our life, when the kids got older, it was like there was nothing in the house. No, at the time, even bikinied women would send me into a rage because I wasn't perfect, because I wasn't them, because I wasn't the exact ideology or body image pictures that I was looking at 9 years old. So it was like one thing reinforced the other. The touching reinforced, I don't own this body. And the porn just said, well, now you have to look like this is the only thing men want. This is it. They don't want anything else. It wasn't until I was, I don't know, uh, late 40s, early 50s when I found out a friend of mine and we talked openly about sex. Because that was the good side about being comfortable with sex is that a lot of males were comfortable. I was talking with males about sex. That didn't mean it had to lead to something, but I was comfortable with it. So it was like a light and a dark of it. And he told me, and it blew my mind because I wish I'd known this at a younger age, is that he's like, I'm not into the normal porn stuff. He's like, I like older women. I like, what they call granny porn, which I never even heard of. It's not grannies, it's just older women, like, who have imperfections. Like, and I was like, how is that possible? How is that possible? How can a man not be attracted to the same things that I am? Because that's how I grew up. And it blew me away. And then I had another good friend of mine say that And I was like, you're bullshitting. Sorry, language. But he's like, no, I love scars on a woman. He's like, we talked about my stomach thing. He's like, whether you get surgery or not, doesn't matter. He's like, I'm the person that looks at every scar as, hey, that's a woman's journey. That's what she's been through in her life. I'm like, what? You know? But I didn't learn these things until way later. So I'll end here because it's 15 minutes. But I wanted to kind of get into how I was affected at 9 and how it just didn't get any better. And it deeply, deeply screwed up my neurological system, my um everything. It rewired my brain to think things that were not real, to disassociate from who I was here in the flesh, and created this whole other illusion that I would never, ever be able to attain. Like, it just, I mean, and I literally did want to go into sex industries, like, stripping or whatever. But at the time, my body was never perfect enough to even go down that road. For modeling, you can, you can use makeup, you can do things, but when you're live on a stage in front of people, but I couldn't see like that people had normal, um, freckles and just normal things on their body because I never saw it. They were always airbrushed out. So I didn't know any of this. Like, so when I looked at myself, even doing modeling, I'm like, how? Why are you doing this? But okay, that'll be another video. So I'm going to end here. And I hope that kind of gives you a little view, mind's eye into a child's brain when they're being exposed to things. So thank you, and I will talk to you soon.